The anti-corporate movement is a social-economic ideology which condemns the support of large companies and their growing role within the politics of the modern world. It's an ideology which is immortalised within Cyberpunk 2077, all the way from its dubious release to the world building and sociology it explores. It also happens to be an ideology which developers CD Projekt Red was founded to fight. In order to explain the satire of Cyberpunk 2077, we require a trip back to 1989. "1989 was a year of transitions. Nirvana released their debut album, creating a shift in popular musical styles. The Nintendo Game Boy had started to cement handheld gaming as a mainstay of popular media, and most importantly, the Berlin Wall was toppled. Poland spent much of the 1900s as a victory spoil for the Red Army after the events of World War II, and was forced into many Soviet policies such as the Stanov Doctrine. The Stanov Doctrine was a Stalinist policy which was adapted from 1946 to 1953 and enforced that Soviet artists, writers and creatives had to conform to the party line in their creative work. Despite its short lifespan, it set the basis for cultural control within the Soviet Union and created wide discouragement against importing Western media. Much like modern-day China, Soviet Poland had very little care for copyright laws and spawned one of the biggest piracy rings ever seen within modern media. This encouraged bootleggers to strip products of their digital rights management systems. After the Berlin Wall fell and Poland gained a more localised government, there was still a huge range of people who refused to pay retail prices for their digital media, and Poland's bootleggers still thrived. This is where CD Projekt Red enters the picture. Marcin Nowinski and Michael Kosinski both dreamed of a corporate video game market within Poland. A market where bootleggers were no longer the driving retailers, and where people paid development companies directly for their games. In 1994, they founded CD Projekt Red, with the individual selling point of localised games. They would obtain the import rights from foreign publishers, and where possible, provide in-game localisation for text and voice lines, typically through reverse engineering to decompile the game's code. They would then package the game with localised instruction manuals and other physical goodies, hoping that the added features would draw buyers away from pirated copies. Their first major success was in 1998 with Baldur's Gate, with which they sold 18,000 units on its first day of release in Poland. Due to this success, Interplay, the publisher of Baldur's Gate, asked CD Projekt Red if they could do a similar treatment to Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, a console title released in 2001. As their past work had been strictly on PC games, the company hesitantly accepted to try and port it, but the project fell through before it was completed. Despite the result, CD Projekt Red realised that they had the ability to make their own games, and developed into the CDPR we know and love today. Compare this story with the ideology of Cyberpunk 2077. Cyberpunk is a game built around the predatory nature of megacorporations and the public-led destruction of hypercapitalism. All controlling corporations patrol the streets with private armies. They provide healthcare at an astronomical cost, and leave anyone poor to die or kill anyone who opposes them. It's a world dreaming to free itself from extremist right-wing economics. Now look again at the story of CDPR, a corporation dreaming of capitalism to free itself from extremist left-wing economics. This irony makes the world of Cyberpunk 2077 fall halfway between a satire of its own writers and a genius exploration into an alternate reality CDPR. Cyberpunk's release was interesting. I don't have any clips of the game on release, as it's only a recent addition to my library. However, even after multiple patches, it still has its quirks.
What do you think, man?
Why's everyone got it out for me? We got a problem?
If they don't let you touch you, it don't matter.
Enjoying the weather? Don't let that weather.
I don't think it's hard to imagine that a game releasing in such a poor state led to a multitude of consumers opting to wait to buy the game, or just completely refusing to. This in turn led to vast amounts of piracy. Now, whilst I don't want to sit and give my opinion on video game piracy, it would be impossible to avoid talking about the topic objectively. There's something beautifully poetic about a game against hyper-consumerism spending its release year as one of the most pirated games in recent memory. A lot of people were at a bit of a moral crossroads over how to acquire the game. The CDPR developers obviously deserve to be paid for their work, yet the general consensus at the time was that it wasn't the fault of the developers, but instead the board members and financial backers of CDPR. Over the next few months, multiple stories emerged which brought to light the events around the game's release. Things like porting it onto consoles it wasn't designed to be played on purely to grab a few more sales, or the overworking of the development team. These stories encouraged more and more people to pirate the game in order to punish the board members and investors of CDPR. Some people even viewed this as their very own Johnny Silverhand style of anti-corporate protest. You could also make a point of satire about CDPR's decision to distribute an anime based around wanting to destroy monopolised conglomerates via Netflix. You know, the company which wants you to stop giving people you don't live with your login details. The one which wants every single individual house to have its own subscription, where it can tailor its content to you based on its millions of pieces of data about each person's likes, dislikes and habits. A company which would dream of becoming the real-world version of Arasaka. Want to lend your mate your Netflix password because you think he'd love the hit new anime series Edgerunners based on CDPR's magnum opus Cyberpunk 2077? No can do, buddy. The Netflix corporation's watching. All jokes aside, this was incredibly surprising to me. It felt like the socio-economic equivalent to the Ryanair Twitter account trying to seem politically based. Netflix have created the most anti-consumer DRM system imaginable over the last 6 months, and Edgerunners is a show which presents a world set at the endgame of Netflix's dream society. In the words of the 1982 hit Bow Wow Wow song, I want candy, and by candy, I mean monopolistic control of the working class, and by I mean Netflix. Fuck Netflix. All my homies hate Netflix. Game devs? Overworked? No. Seriously? The 1% wouldn't overwork people under the guise of it being a passion project, right? Not seeing your family for weeks on end? You should be grateful. Little Timmy will be much happier growing up with his name in the credits of a game despite not seeing his dad for 2 months, cried the CDPR board members. This, for me, is the peak of the satire. The piece de la resistance of not only corporatism, but worker exploitation. The studio head at CD Projekt Red, Adam Badowski, suggested in an email obtained by Bloomberg that he somehow had no choice. I repeat, no choice but to force his employees to work harder to resolve the remaining bugs and glitches in the game, even though a CD Projekt Red employee told Bloomberg that some staff members had already worked weekends and nights for over a year. Now, I want to give a medal to this next man, because you can tell that he lived and breathed Cyberpunk during its development. When given the opportunity to unionise against CD Projekt Red's higher-up, one developer asked if CDPR's directors felt it was hypocritical to make a game about corporate exploitation while expecting that their employees work overtime. The response was vague and non-committal. But hey, at least you would have had Trauma Team coverage, right? Want to hear something which explains just how hard the higher-ups of CDPR messed up? Even their own investors launched a class action lawsuit against them. And won. This final chapter feels like a little bit of a stretch without explanation, so give me a bit of time here. I also want to protect myself from a trip to the Polish court system by saying that this is CDPR Try to decorate regular patches of unfinished, broken games as generous offerings. Now, I want to preface this with the fact that Witcher 3 is one of my favourite games of all time, and Cyberpunk has the best written and artistically produced world of any piece of modern media that I've consumed, so this video is coming from a place of love for the developers, but not the PR team or directors. Our old pal Marcin Owinski said in 2015 that free DLC should be an industry standard. Sounds lovely, but some of you eagle-eared viewers may be sat thinking about the 2 paid DLC for The Witcher 3 and the upcoming paid Cyberpunk DLC. You see, let me explain. Marcin is not talking about expansions or substantial content drops. He's instead talking about individual pieces of content spread out over a period of time after release. For The Witcher 3, there's been armor sets, new contracts, different looks for certain characters, new weapons, new quests, and finally, a new Game Plus mode. These aren't exciting new content drops. These are things which weren't finished in time for the main release, and Marcin is trying to make us feel good for finally getting them. The same kind of language can be seen when talking about the monumental effort to make Cyberpunk 2077 a finished product. In the most recent dev update, CDPR dropped this gem of a statement. Furthermore, this latest update also comes with new pieces of 3 additional content that expands what Cyberpunk 2077 has to offer gamers. Rentable apartments featuring unique player character interactions, fresh weapons and gear, new customization options, and more. Now, don't get me wrong, I applaud CDPR for actually making strides to fix the game. They haven't. The game is still GTA 4 swing set levels of glitchy, but hey, at least we have exciting free DLC, which definitely wasn't just a feature they didn't have time to add in at launch, right? We of course don't know this as a fact, so take it with a pinch of salt, but I very much doubt they wouldn't just save new content for the upcoming paid DLC if it wasn't already a planned feature at release. This section is already a bit of a stretch, so let's get a bit silly here at the end. You know the part in Edgerunners when dies near the start and doesn't have the right medical cover, so they get their body cremated so doesn't have to pay to transport their corpse? Yeah, that's what this reminds me of. What a lovely optional extra. What a lovely free DLC. Thank you for watching all the way through. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed it or found it interesting, then you know, the usual YouTube spiel, just likes and all that kind of stuff that makes it actually get seen by people. It'd be really appreciated. I did plan on doing one of these like 2 weeks after my last one, and then life happens because I'm not unemployed, unfortunately. So yeah, hopefully I should have another one coming out pretty soon. I've already got another script written. Although I say that and I had this script written pretty much instantly after the last, and then spent a very long time kind of getting the time to actually record all this and edit it. And then I got really into Red Dead Redemption 2, so that might be a little bit of a hint on what's coming next. Other stuff that might be coming up soon in terms of games is like the older Tomb Raiders I might do something about, stuff like that. So there's going to be some interesting kind of mix of new and old games coming on the way. So yeah, I haven't picked the topics yet, but I'm sure I'll find one. I like an excuse to just ramble about stuff I like, so kind of finding some way to frame them is always kind of interesting. So yeah, hopefully should be some interesting stuff kind of coming soon, so feel free to subscribe and stick around if you found it interesting. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your May, I guess.